William had approved a dinner meant to calm the family, but someone inside the palace had rewritten the seating plan hours before the guests arrived. Meghan's refusal had not ruined the plan, it had exposed a trap that even William had not been told existed. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel for more hidden royal stories, palace secrets, and dramatic moments the monarchy would rather keep behind closed doors. The original arrangement had been simple. Meghan would sit beside Harry, while Kate would take her place across the table with William nearby. It was not a perfect solution, but it allowed both couples to remain together while avoiding the appearance of forced intimacy. William had approved it because he wanted the dinner to lower the tension, not create another confrontation. Yet shortly before the guests arrived, palace staff received a revised document marked with two harmless-sounding words: protocol adjustments. Those adjustments changed everything. Harry was moved closer to William and several senior officials. Kate and Meghan were placed side by side, where every pause, expression, and whispered exchange could be closely watched. The new arrangement did not simply separate two husbands from their wives. It turned Meghan and Kate into the emotional center of the entire evening. William immediately understood what had happened. Someone had used his authority to make the change look official. A senior aide stepped forward and defended the revision. He claimed it had been required by rank, security concerns, and the proper order of conversation. The explanation sounded polished, but Harry did not accept it. He reminded the aide that rank had never required married couples to be separated at similar private dinners. There was no security threat. There was only a carefully prepared excuse. Meghan now saw the deeper purpose. By placing her beside Kate, the palace could capture photographs suggesting that every disagreement had been settled. One polite smile could be presented as forgiveness. One brief conversation could be sold as reconciliation. Then, Kate spoke. She admitted she had been informed about the new seating arrangement earlier, but she had been told Meghan had already approved it. Meghan had been given the opposite impression, that Kate had personally agreed to the change. The truth landed heavily. Neither woman had created the situation. Each had been given a different story, so both would walk into the same trap without resistance. William demanded every version of the seating plan. When the papers were brought to him, he discovered his initials on the final page. They looked convincing, but he had never written them. The quiet family dispute had suddenly become something far more dangerous. Someone inside the palace had forged the approval of the future king. Charles had not yet entered the room, but several aides kept glancing toward the doors leading to his private apartments. William noticed. He ordered that no guests sit down until the person responsible was identified. Then he found a handwritten note attached to the revised plan. It contained one final instruction: Meghan must not be seated near a particular guest. The mysterious guest was not a politician or foreign dignitary, but a former royal archivist who knew the truth about a missing piece of Diana's private jewelry. Across the room sat a former keeper of royal records who had spent years cataloging Diana's private possessions. Meghan had been prevented from sitting near him for one reason: he knew that a jewel promised to both brothers had quietly disappeared from the family inventory. He was not a man who sought attention. For years, he had worked behind closed doors, handling private inventories, inheritance records, and jewel loan agreements that few people were ever allowed to see. He knew which pieces belonged to the crown, which were family heirlooms, and which had remained Diana's personal property. More importantly, he knew when those categories had been quietly changed. Before the dinner, the former archivist had requested a private conversation with Harry. The request never reached him. Palace officials redirected the man, delayed the meeting, and told him the evening was not the proper place for sensitive family matters. Now the rewritten seating plan made the purpose of those delays impossible to ignore. The missing jewel was not part of the crown jewels. It did not belong to the monarch or the state. It had been associated personally with Diana, who wore it during one of the most painful periods of her royal life. That history gave it a meaning no official valuation could measure. It represented not only wealth, but endurance, loneliness, and the private cost of remaining inside the monarchy. After Diana's death, William and Harry had reportedly been assured that the piece would remain available to both branches of her family. Neither brother would be erased from its future. Yet years later, when Harry was allowed to review selected inheritance records, the jewel's inventory number had vanished. Meghan began asking questions after references to the piece were also removed from private correspondence. The answers she received were polished but empty. Palace officials spoke of protected custody and future royal use, carefully avoiding the one question that mattered: who controlled it now? The former archivist finally spoke. The jewel had not been lost. It had not been sold, misplaced, or damaged. It had been deliberately reclassified. That single decision changed everything. Once reclassified, the piece no longer remained under the shared personal inheritance of Diana's sons. Control had shifted toward the institution, where access could be granted, delayed, or denied according to palace priorities. Meghan now understood why she had been moved away from him. Had she sat nearby, she could have asked the questions palace officials had spent years avoiding. The dinner was never only about presenting peace between two women. It was also about controlling who could speak to whom. Then, the archivist described the jewel in greater detail. Kate's composure suddenly weakened. She did not speak, but William noticed the tension immediately. Her reaction told him the missing piece might not be locked inside a distant vault. It might already have passed through his own household. Before the archivist could explain further, a senior aide interrupted and declared that his presence had created an unexpected protocol breach. The man was instructed to leave at once. William blocked the archivist's removal, but Kate's reaction had already revealed something more dangerous. The missing jewel had once been brought into her private dressing room. Kate had never asked for Diana's missing jewel, yet months earlier it had arrived inside a sealed case with instructions for an official appearance. She refused to wear it, but she had remained silent about the condition attached to the palace's mysterious loan. With William now blocking the archivist's removal, Kate could no longer avoid the truth. She admitted that the jewel had been delivered to her household before an important royal engagement. There had been no warning, no family discussion, and no copy of Diana's original private inventory. Only a sealed case and a carefully worded note describing the piece as part of a collection reserved for the future queen. The language disturbed her immediately. It did not mention Harry. It did not explain whether Diana's sons had agreed to the arrangement. Instead, it spoke as though the jewel had always been intended to move in one direction, toward William's household and the future of the crown. Kate understood the emotional danger. Wearing the piece would not be seen as a simple royal loan. It would invite comparisons with Diana, reopen old wounds, and suggest that one branch of the family had inherited a greater claim to her memory. She privately asked whether Harry had approved its use. The answer never came. Officials only assured her that all necessary questions had been handled. William had been given a different explanation. He was told the jewel came from a protected family collection and that every inheritance matter had already been settled. He believed the palace because the system was designed to sound final. There were documents, official phrases, and confident voices. Nothing appeared uncertain until the dinner exposed how much had been hidden. Kate eventually refused to wear the jewel. She feared the appearance would deepen the divide and turn Diana's memory into another public contest between the brothers. Yet palace officials instructed her not to discuss the offer. The legal status of the piece, they said, was under review. Meghan's response was immediate. She asked why Kate had not warned Harry that his mother's property had entered William's household. Kate did not defend herself with anger. She admitted that silence had felt safer than confronting the institution that controlled the collection. Challenging the decision might have created another scandal, damaged William's position, and placed her against advisors who claimed to be protecting the monarchy. Her confession changed the meaning of the entire conflict. This was no longer simply Meghan against Kate. Both women had been given different instructions, different information, and different roles inside the same hidden system. William's anger deepened. Kate had been placed in a position where wearing Diana's jewel could strengthen his future status while quietly weakening Harry's claim. Harry saw something even harsher. His connection to his mother appeared to matter less because he had stepped away from royal duty. Then the archivist revealed the final condition. The jewel had been reclassified under a private memorandum signed after Diana's death. According to its terms, it could only be worn by a woman actively representing the crown. That hidden rule did more than exclude Meghan. It suggested someone had rewritten Diana's inheritance to reward obedience and punish anyone who left royal control. The secret memorandum transformed Diana's personal jewel into a reward for royal service. By its terms, Meghan could never touch it, Harry could never claim it, and Kate could inherit it only by remaining loyal to the institution that had controlled Diana herself. The wording was cold and deliberate. Access depended on active royal service, official approval, and continued loyalty to the crown. The jewel was no longer treated as a mother's private possession. It had become an instrument of discipline, something the palace could grant to those who remained inside the system and withhold from those who stepped beyond it. Harry reacted first. He argued that Diana's belongings should never be used to force obedience from her sons or their families. His mother had already spent years trapped between personal pain and public duty. To use her jewelry as a reward for loyalty was not protection, it was control carried out in her name. Meghan made her position clear. This was not about whether she wanted to wear the piece. It was about the palace rewriting the wishes of a woman who could no longer defend them. The jewel had become proof that even Diana's memory could be reorganized to serve the monarchy. William initially resisted that conclusion. He argued that historically important pieces required protection from sale, publicity, and damaging family disputes. But the archivist answered calmly. Protection did not require removing Harry's rights. It did not require secrecy, and it certainly did not require hiding the memorandum from both brothers. Kate now understood the role created for her. The rule made her the symbol of royal approval, the woman considered worthy because she remained in service. Meghan, by contrast, became the symbol of exclusion. One woman was elevated. The other was erased. The altered seating plan suddenly made perfect sense. By placing Meghan beside Kate, the palace had intended to show both women accepting those assigned roles. Kate would represent continuity. Meghan would appear to submit to it. A single photograph could transform coercion into unity. That was why Meghan had refused the chair. She was not rejecting Kate. She was refusing to be used as silent proof that the arrangement was fair. Harry demanded to know who had authorized the memorandum and why neither brother had been informed. The archivist produced the name of a senior advisor who had served both the late Queen and Charles. Then he revealed a second notation, more disturbing than the first. The restriction had been created to prevent Diana's image from being used by anyone outside the working monarchy. William finally saw the full purpose. The rule did not merely control ownership. It controlled who could publicly inherit Diana's emotional power. Kate asked whether other pieces had been reclassified in the same way. The archivist hesitated, then confirmed that this jewel might be only one part of a much larger hidden system. Before William could demand the full list, Charles entered the room, and the silence that followed made clear he already knew why the dinner had stopped. Charles entered expecting obedience, not confrontation. He ordered everyone to take their assigned seats and warned that private inheritance matters would not disrupt a royal gathering. But William's response stunned the table. because for the first time he openly refused his father's command. Charles treated the crisis as though it were nothing more than an unfortunate misunderstanding. His tone was controlled, but the order behind it was unmistakable. The forged plan was to be removed. The guests were to return to their places. Dinner would begin, and the monarchy would continue as though nothing had happened. Meghan remained standing. Her refusal was no longer about a chair. Sitting down now would allow ceremony to erase everything that had been exposed: the forged approval, the hidden memorandum, and the quiet effort to control Diana's legacy through palace rules. Harry stepped forward and told Charles that no meal could continue while his mother's inheritance was being hidden behind protocol. The palace had turned a personal possession into a test of loyalty, then expected the family to accept it in silence. Charles rejected that accusation. He argued that royal objects often carried complex legal and historical conditions. They could not simply be divided according to emotion, personal memory, or family pressure. To him, the rules protected the monarchy from chaos. William asked the question Charles had been avoiding. Had he known about the memorandum restricting the jewel to women actively serving the crown? Charles did not answer directly. He said the arrangement had been created to preserve stability, prevent exploitation, and protect Diana's possessions from becoming part of another public conflict. That careful reply told William enough. The forged seating plan had not only been designed to control Meghan and Kate, it had also been created to keep the discussion from reaching Charles before the dinner was safely underway. Then, Kate made her choice. She said she would not sit in a chair selected to manufacture a false image. Her words broke the division the palace had tried to create between the two women. For once, neither would perform the role assigned to her. Charles warned William that challenging the private inventories could expose disputes involving the late Queen, the Queen Mother, and generations of family property. Once those records were questioned, there might be no limit to what followed. William's answer was quiet, but it carried more force than anger. Secrecy could not be defended merely because it was old. He ordered the doors closed and instructed the staff that no official photographs would be taken. Then, in front of everyone, William lifted Meghan's chair and placed it beside Harry. The gesture overturned the king's instruction, rejected the altered hierarchy, and destroyed the image the palace had planned to present. No one at the table had expected the future king to openly challenge the man already wearing the crown. Charles warned him that this decision would create consequences reaching far beyond one dinner. William had broken the seating plan, but his defiance forced Charles to reveal the real reason Diana's jewel had been sealed away from Harry. The palace had not hidden the jewel because of money, security, or tradition. It had been sealed away because advisors feared another woman could wear Diana's symbols while standing outside royal control. And Meghan had become the exact possibility they wanted to prevent. With the dinner still frozen around him, Charles finally explained what the memorandum had truly been designed to stop. Palace advisors had feared that Diana's private jewels could become more than family possessions. In the wrong setting, worn by the wrong person, they could become symbols of resistance against the monarchy itself. That fear deepened after Harry married Meghan. Officials began imagining a future in which pieces linked to Diana appeared at independent public events, far beyond palace control. A single jewel could create a powerful connection between Meghan and Diana. It could suggest that Diana's struggle had passed to another royal woman willing to challenge the institution from outside its walls. When Harry and Meghan began questioning press arrangements, palace decisions, and the limits placed upon them, the restrictions were strengthened. What had once been a quiet safeguard became a firm barrier. Meghan now understood that she had been excluded before she ever asked about the jewel. The decision had already been made about who she might become and what Diana's legacy could mean in her hands. Harry saw something even more personal. His mother's belongings were being used to shape his choices as an adult. remaining close to the crown could bring access. Walking away meant losing not only status, but pieces of Diana's private memory. William was shaken for a different reason. His position as future king had been used to justify giving his household greater control. The palace had protected his inheritance by weakening Harry's, then hidden the imbalance behind duty and tradition. Kate admitted that comparisons with Diana had often been encouraged when they helped the monarchy. Her clothing, her manner, and even the jewelry chosen for official appearances could be used to suggest continuity. But when that same connection threatened palace authority, it was restricted. Meghan answered with a painful truth. Royal women were praised when their image strengthened the crown, controlled when they became unpredictable, and erased when they refused the role written for them. Charles defended the decision as protection. The monarchy, he argued, could not survive another public conflict built around a globally recognized royal woman. But William rejected that logic. Trying to prevent another Diana had repeated the same behavior that caused so much of her suffering. Fear, silence, and control disguised as duty. Then the archivist revealed that private letters had once been attached to Diana's original inventory. Those letters were separated when the jewel was reclassified. One may contain Diana's own instructions for how her possessions should pass between her sons. The document remained inside a sealed archival file that could only be opened with approval from the monarch or the heir. William turned toward Charles and demanded that the file be opened. Charles refused, but William's final decision transformed Meghan's quiet protest into the most serious challenge to palace authority that evening. Everyone expected William to protect his inheritance, defend royal tradition, and silence the dispute. Instead, he surrendered his household's exclusive claim to the jewel and demanded Diana's sealed files be reviewed, even if the truth weakened his own position as the future king. Charles's refusal should have ended the discussion. Inside the monarchy, sealed files remained sealed, because authority depended on limits few people dared to challenge. But William no longer saw the dispute as a private argument over one jewel. The palace had manipulated two brothers, used Kate as a symbol of approval, and marked Meghan for exclusion before she had ever asked a question. William declared that his household would no longer accept, borrow, or display the disputed piece until its true ownership had been established. It was a stunning surrender. The jewel had been reserved for the future queen, yet the future king was now rejecting that advantage in front of Charles, senior advisors, and the very officials who had created it. Harry remained cautious. He warned that a palace-controlled investigation could become another performance, carefully delayed, narrowly written, and ultimately designed to protect the same people responsible for the secrecy. William agreed. The review, he said, would include representatives chosen by both brothers, independent legal advisors, and the former archivist who had first exposed the missing records. Kate then offered every letter, loan document, and private instruction sent to her household concerning Diana's jewelry. Her decision carried its own risk. Those papers could reveal how often her image had been managed, how frequently Diana's memory had been used, and how much she had been expected to accept without asking questions. Only then did Meghan take the chair beside Harry. She made clear that her refusal had never been a personal rejection of Kate. She had refused the role created for both women, one presented as obedient and worthy, the other treated as dangerous and undeserving. Kate understood, but she did not pretend that one moment could repair years of silence. Trust had been damaged too deeply for a palace dinner to restore it. Charles warned William that opening the files could expose decisions made by respected members of the family, including people who were no longer alive to defend themselves. William answered that protecting powerful names could not matter more than protecting Diana's intentions. The original chair beside Kate was removed before the doors reopened. no official photograph of the dinner was released. Days later, the archivist received permission to examine the sealed file containing Diana's missing letter. The jewel remained locked away, but its future was no longer controlled by one household. Meghan's refusal had exposed how seats, rank, jewelry, and silence could all be turned into weapons of royal power. The palace had tried to use one chair to display unity, but Meghan's refusal forced William to choose between inherited power and Diana's truth, and the files he ordered reopened promised revelations far more dangerous than the dinner itself. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more hidden royal stories, secret jewels, palace betrayals, and mysteries the monarchy would rather keep behind closed doors.